Seder. No
So
problem.
introducing Rabbi Joel Zeff at 10:30 sharp on a Sunday morning as we zip along with Zoom with the Efrat and Eshkola. Rabbi Zeff will give a shir, perhaps a series, I'm not sure, but it's on the significance of birthdays.
Yeah. Okay.
Mine is Tu B'Shvat. So
Really?
it's very important to deal with this topic. My wife is Bet Shvat, so should we
Yeah.
acknowledge it? We'll find out how important it. It's already cost me dinner at Rose's already.
Yeah. Okay. The Seder. So it's amazing the way sort of connections take place. Who would have thought that Bruce had a birthday on Tu B'Shvat? So it happens to be that my wife's birthday is coming up, and we're making like a 65th birthday. So it used to, yeah. Oh, true. Now I'm in big trouble. So it used to be a very magic number, 65. That was sort of standard retirement age in the United States. I think now the retirement age is 165 in the United States. But in any case, as I was like thinking about this idea of bar mitzvah, sorry, a birthday. We also had a lot of bar mitzvahs lately with grandchildren. But in any case, the thing was the birthdays, but it also happens to be connected to the parsha that we read yesterday in Shul, and I'll show you how. So we're gonna do a little screen share here. So hang
By the way,
on.
bar mitzvah would be linked because bar mitzvah is the 13th birthday. So
That's certainly true. That's certainly true. Okay.
no, there's no notes yet. Oh, the notes are frozen. Okay, hopefully we'll come back on. We've had a lot of technical difficulties lately. Okay, you're back, but you're muted. Oh, you have to unmute.
My internet went down, but now it's back. Hopefully
Okay.
it'll stay up. Now
We
I'm
don't
trying
have
to
the
do the
notes.
screen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so
have to,
let me do the screen share again. Try that again. How's that?
nothing yet. It says Joel's ever started
Do you see my
screen
screen?
sharing. Yeah, now we have it.
Okay, great. The Seder. So in the parsha that we read yesterday in the Beit Knesset, we have the mitzvah of Rosh Hodish. Right, so Hodish Hazeh Lachem, it's number 17. So I'm doing this a little bit different order just because I want to tie in with the parsha. Hodish Hazeh Lachem, Rosh Chodashim, Rishonu Lachem, B'Chodshei Shana. Right, this month of the Exodus from Egypt, which is the month of Nisan.
Uh-oh. We lost you. You're muted again, and
This is, I don't know what's going on. Huh.
well,
Try again.
we have the notes. Maybe split screening is an issue. I don't know, but we have them. If you don't want to post them,
Let's,
just read it.
okay, we could try, okay, if everybody has the notes. So in any case, the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh is in last week's parsha, and the Haemek Davar, the Netziv, the great Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhin Yeshiva, Naftali Yehuda Berlin, has an interesting remark to say about this mitzvah that we read yesterday. This notion of Rosh Chodashim, the head of the months. So he wants to analyze why the use of the word head, Rosh. So we usually understand that in a sort of a chronological sense, like Rosh, like Rishon, comes from the same word, first. But he said there's another dimension. Rosh mashma'o kama pa'amim muvchar. He says that sometimes the word Rosh can mean the most choice. The most choice, not just first, but the most choice. And he cites a few examples. And then he goes on to say, the haperush lachem dafka hachodesh hazeh muvchar b'shana. So this month of Nisan is, instead of translated the first, which it is, but it's also the choicest, muvchar. It's the choicest of months. And he's going to explain what that means. Kamoshe chodesh tishrei hua muvchar b'ma shenogeh letzorchei haolam. Just like Tishrei is the most choice month with regards to the needs of the world. The world has certain needs. The planet Earth cannot exist without certain needs being fulfilled. And the month in which it has a special quality of being auspicious for supplying those needs of planet Earth is in Tishrei. So it's choicest with regards to the needs of planet Earth. Why? Mishum shebo nivra holam. Because in Tishrei, the world was created, or more precisely, the process of creation was completed with the creation of the human being on Aleph Tishrei. Uklal gadolhu sheboto yom shedivra oto davar. And he says there's a great principle, and we're going to discuss this today at length. This is really an amazing idea, that the day in which something came into being, the day in which something was created, has a special mystical quality to it, for all time. So the world was created on Aleph Tishrei, Hamik Davar. Comments here, and therefore the needs of the world are met, and it's most auspicious to pray for those needs on the date in which that thing came into being. And in the same sense that Nisan has a special auspicious quality when it comes to Klal Yisrael, because that's the time in which we became a nation. Okay, so that's the connection between the notion of Rosh Chodesh, which is in Nisan, and Tishrei. But the important point for our discussion today is that this sentence of that in the day in which something was created, that day for all time has a mystical, auspicious quality to it. And we'll discuss that more at length in a few minutes. Yes, Bruce.
When you mentioned the word mystical, I have been learning a book with a chavruta called Rationalism versus Mysticism by Rob Slipkin, and he uses the term mystical. So is this purely a mystical idea, or is there something objective, rational about this, or is it just something that's mystical? Because you could say the creation begins with conception, so it's the birth. I mean, there is some question about when something begins on a rational, logical plane, but I'm wondering if it's purely a mystical idea, or just something rational, perhaps.
So, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think that gets into sort of a semantic issue of how to define the word mystical. But I would say
non-verifiable, not based on anything deductible from observation.
Yeah, it's not, put it this way, it's not based on any kind of scientific principles that we are aware of. Because suggesting that there's something about that day in the calendar, the Jewish calendar, that lends itself to be particularly auspicious for certain things, depending upon the day, forever.
It's almost astrological then, a little.
Right, that's what I was going to say. If you think astrology is science, then maybe this is rational. Okay, but if you don't, then it's mystical. Okay, so now I want to go back. Now that we sort of suggested this idea that's linked to last week's parsha, that the day in which something is created has a certain mystical quality, and that's why Nisan has a special quality to it for certain purposes, and Tishrei has certain special qualities. Put that aside for the time being. Now I want to start from point one. Now, if we want to discuss the significance of birthdays, a good place to start would be to say, what does the Torah have to say about birthdays? And as I'm sure many of you know, there's only one place in the Torah which discusses birthdays, and that is Vayihi b'yom hashlishi, Yom Huledet et Paro. And it was on the third day, which was the day of the birth of Pharaoh. This is not the Pharaoh from the Exodus story, right? This is the Pharaoh that is with the Joseph story. So, Vayas Mishteh L'chol Avadav. He made a big party. So this is the biblical source for birthday parties. Hey, Pharaoh. Now that's significant. That's pretty interesting. If we wanted to know, is it good for the Jews to have a birthday party? The biblical precedent is Pharaoh. I'm not so sure that the message is particularly positive, right? Especially since the pharaohs were deified, and presumably the parties had some pagan elements to them. Let's just take a look at how Rashi explains this verse here. Rashi says, Yom Huledet Paro, Yom Ledato, the day of the birth of Pharaoh. He says the day of the birth of Korin Lo Yom Genusia, and it's called the day of Genusia. Genusia is a Greek word, and you'll see why it's important to know that word in a moment. So that's our first source. It's only a source in Tanakh that mentions a birthday party. Let's take a look now. If we did very little in Tanakh, how about if we skip forward to Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Mishnah? So let's see what the Mishnah has to say about birthday parties. This is a Mishnah from Masechet Avodah Zarah. Discusses idolatry. Lifnei eidehen shel odei kochim mazalot shlosha yamim.
Which number are you on right now?
Yes, number three.
Okay.
So 3 days before the festivals of idolaters, asur laseit lateit imahen. You're not allowed to do business deals with them. What's the idea behind this? That's 3 days before some pagan holiday, and you do a business deal, which the pagan makes money from it. And what does he do? He takes the money, which came from you, because you did a deal with him, and he's going to use that money for his pagan festival. So since we don't want to be a supporter of pagan festivals, 3 days before the festival, you shouldn't do a business deal with a pagan. That's the Mishnah. Presumably, if it's further distanced from the festival, he'll use the money for other purposes, not necessarily to celebrate the pagan festival. Now, what are these pagan festivals? The Elu Eidehen Shel Akum. And these are the festivals of the idolaters. And it lists a bunch of festivals. We don't know exactly what these things are. At least I don't know exactly what these things are. But among this list is, towards the end, the Yom Genusia Shel Malachim, and the birthday of the king. Just like Paro had a big festival on his birthday, so it's listed as a pagan holiday, which you're not allowed to do business with a pagan 3 days before that, the birthday of the king. So I think we're done. Having a birthday party is, the message emerging is pretty negative, right?
Oh, the birth of the king. It doesn't refer to the average person.
Yeah, except, we live in a post-king society. We're all kings, right? Everybody's a king in his home. I know you are, Bruce. You're just waited on hand and foot, and everybody kisses your ring and things like that. So, yeah. So, and I just want to show you an example. So there's a Rav in Israel. He's a well-known Rav. He's the Rav of Kiryat Ono, Rav Arusi. And he's one of these rabbis that invites people to send in SMS their halachic questions, and he answers back in 3 words. So someone asked him the following question, She'elah. Mahem gidre atzav hilchati b'chukotehem lo telechu. What are the parameters of the prohibition of the Torah not to walk in their statutes? That's a pasuk in the book of Vayikra, not to walk in the statutes of the pagans. And he gives a whole list of, this is the questionnaire, a whole list of examples of, are we allowed to do these things? And one of them was, kibui nerot bu'ugat yom huleret. Blowing out candles in your birthday cake. He wanted to know, am I allowed to do that? Maybe that's a biblical prohibition of not to walk in their ways. And then the person was asking the question, it continued, Lamase, and forget about blowing out the candles. What about the whole idea of making a birthday party? Is that a problem? And Rav Arusi, who's a very big Talmud Chacham, answered, Niresh Asur, forbidden.
He said, oh no.
Sorry, Bruce, right? It's forbidden. Shahare Yom Huledet Shel HaMelech Hagoy, Asur Aleinu Kayom Edam. And he says, you see from the Mishnah, that a birthday is a pagan festival. V'im kain yotzei sheyom huledet shorasho b'avodah zarah. So you see that the roots of the notion of making a party on your birthday, its root is in idolatry. V'lachein ein linhog yom huledet. No birthdays, forbidden, biblical prohibition. Okay, I'm not sure he would say it's a biblical prohibition. It may be kind of sort of a rabbinic kind of offense. I'm not really sure. He doesn't go into detail here, this particular tshuva, but it's forbidden. I want to point out something interesting, and I don't know if any of you have seen this in your own families. My mother did not know her birthday. People are very shocked at that. She knew it was around Simchat Torah. That's what her parents told her. When when's my birthday? Oh, it's Simchat Torah. She wasn't born on Simchat Torah. But my mother was born in Europe, and in Eastern Europe, I talked to a lot of people who tell me the same story. It was not of great significance. People didn't celebrate their birthdays. And what they would do is, the only way they remembered their birthday was that it was, what holiday was it near? So everybody's birthday was around some kind of holiday, but they didn't know precisely when it was.
Does that mean they didn't celebrate on some day just to designate it?
No, they didn't celebrate it at all.
Okay.
It's irrelevant. Now, the truth of the matter is, there are issues in which a birthday becomes relevant. So, for instance, becoming a bar mitzvah, gotta know how old you are, okay? But it was not something of importance. And we just have to call a spade a spade. The fact that I would imagine everybody here knows their birthday precisely, maybe knows what time they were born when you went to your board-certified astrologer to have your horoscope done. Right? You have to know exactly the time of day, etc.
Well, the boy needs to know his Brit. You really have to know for a boy. The parents need to know when to do the Brit.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that's why my mother didn't know. My father did know his birthday. It could be that they would be more makbid, more careful with boys, because just there's more of a practical reason. In any case, the fact that in contemporary Western society that we're very aware of our birthdays and we celebrate them, and it's a big yontif, the birthdays. So it's hard to deny that that's an influence of the Western society, the Christian cultures in which we live. It comes from them. It's not something that's intrinsic to Jewish culture, assuming there's such a thing as Jewish culture. Okay, so Rav Arusi's point here is well taken, and it's certainly based upon a superficial glance at the Torah itself, and in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Mishnah, is not a very good association. Pharaoh's birthday, that's the only birthday party we know of, and as a pagan festival in Masechet Avodah Zarah. Fine. I want to show you an interesting.
Rabbi,
yes.
The thing is, today we all know our birthday, but we talked to my grandfather. The grandfather, he knew. He used to know what it was, Simchas Torah or Sukkot and so, but they didn't know the birthday.
Right? That's what I was saying. It's exactly the story I told about my grandmother. So I think your grandfather and my grandmother had the same attitude. Right? Exactly. That was your father, I think you said. It's the same issue. Right? It was not a big deal. Now, I want to show you something interesting. This next piece here is a more of a scholarly analysis of the issue by Rabbi David Halevi. He was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and he wrote a series of books, Aseh L'Charav. He also wrote a kind of a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is very popular in schools. It used to be, at least. I don't know how much it's used anymore. But this is just part of his analysis here, and it's much more nuanced. The Hebrew, I just translated a small part of the English, but we'll do right now together from the beginning here. Ve'afal pi shemikoram b'minhagei odei avodah zarah kadmonim. Now, so he says, this is in the middle still, even though the source of the idea of having a birthday party is rooted in idolatrous cultures. He says, despite the fact that it has its roots, Rabbi Arusi said its roots are in idolatry, forbidden. He says, I agree, its roots are in idolatry, but it's not forbidden. He sees no reason why not to celebrate it within the circle of the family. Why? Because celebrating a birthday is actually something which is rational, understandable. Bruce, you asked about that. If something is rational, understandable, he says it's totally rational and understandable to celebrate birthday. Why? Because after all, it's another year of life that we've merited to have, right? And so that is associated for that person and to those who are in his circle of family and friends. Joy, why not celebrate that? Makes sense. So he says, now, the ancient nations, pagan nations, so they expressed that joy in their way, which was through idolatrous practices, sacrifices to the gods. But if a Yid wants to celebrate a birthday and to express their joy by making a Thanksgiving meal to God, that God has granted us another year of life, or even if you're not so religious, just you're happy, you're alive, that's also good. There's no association at all with Avodah Zarah. And he says something that's really important here. Celebrating the birthday is not the problem. It's the way you celebrate it. And since the pagans did it through offering sacrifices to their gods, that's the problem. Now listen to this, and I love this. Why should it be forbidden to celebrate it in our way? Just because, as an example, they pray, idolaters pray. So they pray to their gods. Should we not pray? Right? We can't pray. It's forbidden. Why? Because the idolaters pray. So we shouldn't be able to pray. Or would you think that anything which is good and logical that they do becomes forbidden for us? That's ridiculous. So this is a very important principle now, which could be a whole shiur run of itself, which we're not going to do. And that is, what are the parameters of you shall not walk in their ways? It's a biblical prohibition. So this Aseh L'Charav, Rav David Halevi, so he is saying, just because idolaters do something doesn't make it prohibited. If they're doing something which is rational, makes sense, compelling, just because they do it doesn't mean that it's forbidden.
Is there a stronger Isser because it's from Egypt and we're specifically told not to do like those Egyptians, and the only source in the whole Torah is Paro's birthday?
Yeah. So actually that notion of don't do like the Egyptians did, we have in the Talmud a whole discussion of what that means, including primarily sexual issues. So that is defined in a very specific way, not just because an Egyptian does it. I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that Egyptians invented beer.
Yeah.
So maybe we should never drink beer, right? But since beer, to use Rabbi David Alevi's words here, it's something which is tov v'hegioni. Beer is good and logical. I think everyone would agree that beer is good and logical. So therefore we should, right? There's no problem with drinking beer. Okay. And he says this principle that if something that the non-Jews do, the pagans do, which has some kind of merit to it, it's just that they celebrate it or observe it in a certain way, right? It doesn't make it forbidden. It's only forbidden if it's inseparable from its pagan elements. And he says that's a principle which he's used in many contexts. So he gives an example here. Really interesting issue. In military funerals in Israel, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to go to one, they put a wreath at the grave. So a lot of Orthodox Jews said, "What, ma pitom? We never did this in the good old days. What is this wreath thing?" So their postscript said it's forbidden. It's has pagan origins. So he poskined, it's no problem. There is no prohibition because there's something rational. There's something that makes sense about using these flowers, these wreaths. It's only when you're doing something that they do where there's nothing meaningful about it in a kind of universal sense. But something which is done that has a rational purpose, it's something, the way to give honor, or it has some other kind of rational, compelling reason, mutar, it's permitted. And now let's go back to celebrating a birthday. He said, therefore, it's clear that celebrating a birthday makes perfect sense. We're thanking God for another year. So it's not forbidden. But he doesn't like birthdays. In the last paragraph, he says, but go to birthday parties. I'm not saying it's forbidden, he says, because of idolatry, but it's stupid. It's just a way to party that has no virtue to it, no compelling content. Oh, we're talking about kids. Okay, you can make them happy. Make a birthday party. But people like Bruce, who has reached the age to vote, right? So an adult, they invite their friends and their family, even though there's no isur, there's nothing particularly worthwhile about it, and you shouldn't do it. So that's a very interesting analysis. So, Bruce, if you have a birthday party, it's not an Isur Deraita. It's just stupid.
What camp is this rabbi happen to be in? If that's a fair question. I mean, is this a Haredi rabbi?
So, I actually don't know that much about him, but I know, I think he was Haredi, sort of that's his background. But he was very open and understanding and very popular. He was a very popular rabbi. And like I said, his works were...
I believe he was a true Zionist.
Yeah, he was definitely a Zionist. But I think his background was from Haredi Yeshivot. I mean, he died a long time ago. He's They didn't have Yeshivot Hester around when he was.
I believe he paskined that on Tisha B'Av you should add the word Haita Avela in Nachem, like Rav Goren
Oh
paskined.
wow, yes, that's pretty radical. Yeah, so he was definitely a Zionist, right? But and he was very open but I think probably the way he led his life and probably his education were a Haredi background. Okay, so if we had to,
Question,
yeah.
excuse me. According to this rationale, are we on a slippery slope, chas v'chalila, to if you would consider the Yain Nesech issue, which has nothing to do nowadays with wine has nothing to do with idol worship. So how do you analyze that? If it has nothing to do with idol worship, according to his rationale, just cancel the damn thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting question. So the problem with wine is that there's other elements involved. So I don't want to get into the whole discussion now, but there's two reasons for the prohibition of wine. One is Yein Nesach, and one is Stam Yeinam, even if it wasn't used for idolatrous purposes, we know for a fact, but because of hitchatnut, of intermarriage. So
whiskey's fine, but whiskey's okay.
Yeah,
whiskey's just the wine.
Yeah, so you're saying there's a certain inconsistency, but I don't want to get into that right now. That's a whole other shiur. But so wine has its own added dimension, which goes beyond sort of the pagan association.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to get into wine. I wanted to use it as an example because even the second issue, which I think we're all aware of, which is intermarriage or mixing with them socially, taking it even further, like Bruce mentioned, is that once you take away the main relevance of the principal foundation stone of the reason for the Issa, does that make it automatically disappear, like he's saying?
Yeah. Okay. So that raises a whole other question too, and that's sort of a distinction. So let me just very briefly, just since you asked.
Yeah.
See, with a birthday party, it's a new institution which isn't discussed except for its negative associations, like we saw with Paro and with idolatrous festivals. Okay. So we have this new thing called a secular birthday, whatever it is. We want to know, does it fit into any category of prohibition? See, with wine, it's the opposite. Wine, we know, is prohibited. Stam Yeinam is prohibited. And we want to know, since times have changed, does the prohibition go away? So that's actually a different question. And that has to do with this big issue of if the rationale for a prohibition is no longer relevant, does the prohibition evaporate? So that's a really fascinating issue, but it would be a whole, at least one shiur, and maybe more. A really fascinating issue. Okay, now I want to show you, we're still on a kind of a negative roll right now, because you see Rabbi David Halevi, even though he doesn't want to go so far as to say it's a Torah prohibition of walking the ways of the pagans, but he's not too excited about birthday parties. I want to show you this other source here. This is from Rav Kook's father-in-law. Rav Kook's father-in-law was this great rabbi who was the Rav of Panovich. His name was Rav Ta'omim Rabinovich. And the reason that he has a hyphenated name, I might have mentioned this before, is because he had a twin. So they called the twins Ta'omim. Ta'omim means twins in Hebrew. So his real name was Rabinovich. So he's called the Aderet, which the resh and the taf at the end of the word is Rabinovich Ta'omim. Okay, now, he has a sefer. He also talks about birthdays. This is Rav Kook's father-in-law. Bechol libi ka'asti al mevarchim. We're on source number 6. He says, with all my heart, I would get angry at those people who would give me a bracha. Levarcheni b'yom huladati, ulesamcheni bo. They wanted to give me a bracha on my birthday and to make me happy. And I would become furious when they would do that. If people would come up to me and say, Rabbi Mazel Tov, happy birthday, he became furious. Ka'asti. Right? Umargala befi meodi. And I used to always say, from my earliest days I can remember, Shalom matzanu simchat yom huledet b'sifreinu hakadoshim. We do not find in our holy books such a thing as a yom huledet, as a birthday. We find it associated with Pharaoh. We find it associated as an idolatrous holiday, right? Rak b'leidat paro levad, only Pharaoh. V'davar zeh eino l'ruach am kadosh. This idea of a birthday party, birthday celebration, is not befitting the spirit of a holy nation. Wow. It's just amazing, something we take for granted as perfectly acceptable. The Aderet, by the way, he became the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, the Aderet. He was a very distinguished Rav. Be'im kain lama nismach b'yom huladetenu. Why should we be happy on the day of our birth? Wow. Now,
I think this is really because Goyim do it. Since the Gentiles do this in a big way, it must be we need to avoid it. Just
yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, we're going to go a little bit deeper in a second, but just to remind what you said, many people have made the claim that certain halachic decisions that were made by the conservative movement, say 50, 60, 70 years ago, Orthodox in the United States, just because the conservatives took a certain positions, Orthodox scholars took a different position, not because the original decision made by these conservative rabbis had no basis. It's just because they said it, and so we just got to stay away from them because it's associated with them.
It's almost like the Zionist movement.
Yeah.
I mean, there are big topics that Orthodox chose to draw lines on because they support this, so we are not.
Yeah. I think there could be some psychological element, and it's always a little to sort of psychologically second guess what the dynamics of halachic thinking is. Who knows? So now we're going to go a little bit deeper, but to go a little bit deeper now, we're still in the negative, by the way.
I have a statement. Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
we can mute our good friend there.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I have a statement to make here.
Irving, the rabbi would like you to wait.
Yeah. Just hang on, Erwin. Okay. So now look. I want to look at a Gemara in Masechet Eruvin. Tanu Rabbanan. This is mind blowing. You may have heard this before. Shtei shanim umechze. For 2.5 years, nechlaku Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. There is a big dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. For 2.5 years, they're arguing about it. Halalu omrim noach lo l'adam shelo nivra yoter mishenivra. It would have been better if man had not been created than had been created. Halalu omrim, and the other camp said, noach lo l'adam shenivra yoter mishelo nivra. No, it's better that he has been created than not created. So, is it good for the Jews that human beings exist? Just to put it a little facetiously. So it's machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. For 2.5 years, they argued about it. Then finally, after 2.5 years, they came to a decision. And what is that? Nimnu v'gamru. They took a vote. Noach lo l'adam shelo nivra yoter mishenivra. It's better that man had not been created. Everybody agreed, even Beit Hillel. But what can we do? It's all theoretical since we've been created. Achshav shenivra. But now that we exist, yefashpesh b'ma'asav. A person should finally scrutinize their past behavior. That's what it means. Like, we're here. It would have been better if we weren't here. But now that we're here, make sure you do tshuva over your past transgressions. But Amrilan, some people say no. That's not what the decision. The decision was yemashmesh b'ma'asav. You should scrutinize your future actions to make sure they're kosher. So it'd be better if we weren't created, but now that we're created, we got to walk the straight and narrow, either by carefully examining our past behaviors or carefully scrutinizing our future behaviors. Now, why am I looking at this? We could spend a lot of hours discussing what is at the heart of that dispute. What a crazy dispute. It's better that man created, not created, and that we poskin, it's better that we have not been created. So first of all, I just want to show you that I saw from in the name of the Baal HaTanya, the founder of Chabad Hasidut, an interesting comment on this dispute. Shelo amru chas v'shalom tov lo shelo nivra. If you look at the language of this debate in the Talmud, it doesn't say that it would have been better to have not been created, right? The way you would say better would be tov. It would have been better if he hadn't been created. That's not the words of the Talmud. The Talmud says Noach. It would have been Noach. Now, Noach means easy, restful, right? You can't say it would have been better that we not be created. That's heresy. It's been heresy to say that. It's just Noach. It's less Noach that we're created. So now he's going to explain it. Shaharei hayirida hi bishvil aliyat gdola v'nifla lein case. What does it mean? It says the following. Something which is Noach means easy, restful. You know, everyone that's participating in the shiur, before you were who you are right now, used to be a disembodied soul. You were a soul up there in the higher spiritual worlds, floating around, having a great time. And then some angel came up to you and said, I got some bad news. You're going to have to go down into this terrestrial world, and you're going to have to live in Teaneck, New Jersey, inside a body. Now, the small consolation it'll be Danny Chesterman's body, which is close to perfection. So, but still, it's a body, and I know that's going to be a little irritating. So it's Noach lo. It would have been easier to not be in this world, because this world is the world of physical temptations and limitations and disease, and you get old and your body falls apart, and if it doesn't fall apart, you're chasing after too much food or too many women or too much wine or whatever. It would have been easier not to come into a body. So the Baal HaTanya says, but there's a reason that we've got to be put into a body, because that descent into this terrestrial world is in order ultimately that there be, as a result, a great ascent. There's a reason, right, that we come into this world, even though it's a struggle, but the benefits are immense. It's a yirida l'tzorach aliyah. It's a descent for the purpose of an ascent. Therefore, that's what Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai were saying. It would have been easier not to come down here. That's all. Everybody agrees it would be easier if we didn't come down here, except for there's a reason. There's a reason we came down here. Because then they're coming down here, that we're in the midst of this great war of living in this terrestrial world. Now, what's the significance of this? You're going to see right now. This is a really fascinating piece from the Munkacher Rebbe. And he's living, Munkacher, I believe, is in Hungary. I think that's what it is now. And he was a well-known rabbi, and he used to give a drasha every year in honor of the head of the republic, I guess the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? Jewish communities and Jewish leaders had to flatter the king, the emperor. You got to get along, right? So he gives this amazing drasha where he explains the idea of birthdays. So, Leyom hu ledet tsar ha-republic, hanoda lemiskah b'chol ha'olam b'midat tuvo v'yashruto. Says this is in honor of the birthday of the head of the republic, who is known in the whole world for his goodness and integrity. V'hinei yom hu ledet Esav b'nei Yisrael. So now, further on in this drasha, he says, now wait a second. When it comes to birthdays of Yidden, of Jews, lo shamanu mi rabotenu v'avotenu kadoshim lasod chen smachot b'yom huledetam. We never see in Jewish literature any kind of advice to make a birthday party. So you may wonder why I'm giving this drasha in honor of the emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the king, the head of this republic. it's not a Jewish thing to make a birthday party. So he says, I'll tell you the reason why there's a distinction between Goyim having a birthday party and Yidden having a birthday party.
Also, this distinction proves that it's for Goyim. I mean, he's doing it specifically for a Goyish leader. That exception proves the point. I mean,
okay, except for he's going to now explain why there's a difference. If it's good for them, why shouldn't it be good for us? Like, what's the difference? So he's going to explain, and this is fascinating. Vatam pashut nir'et merov anvetanutam ki amru chazal nimnu v'gamru noach lo ladam shelo nivra yoter mishenivra. He says everybody knows the Gemara we just learned in Masechet Eruvin that it's better that we not have been born. We just learned that. It would have been better not to have been born. Al kain l'simcha maza oseh b'yamahu. Why should you be happy on the day you were born? You should be sad because the Gemara says it would have been better not to have been born. Why should we rejoice on a day in which something unfortunate happened, that we're born? That's amazing, right? Wait a second. What about this boy? That's only for Jews. Because we have to observe 613 mitzvot. But that's not true of the Goyim. They only have to observe 7. Republic. And therefore for Goyim, and especially for the pious of the nations, the world, like the head of the Republic, Yom Toldotam, Yom Adamazla V'Simcha. For them, their birthday is a day of good luck and joy. Wow. So he's saying no birthday parties for Jews. It's a sad day because we hold it would be better not to have been born. But for Goyim, and very good Goyim like the head of the Republic over here, it makes sense. Why? Because he has only 7 mitzvot relevant to him, and we have 613. Now, that's all he says. What does that mean? So it's a little hard to know what he means, but I have a speculation, but I'm sort of curious. Maybe we can have it's sort of hard to do on Zoom, but anybody to make a suggestion? Why should it be that because we have 613 mitzvot, it would be better not to have been born, and therefore we don't celebrate birthdays? But for Goyim, they only have 7, so that makes sense for them to celebrate their birthdays. Anybody like to suggest what that means?
Because with 613, who can fulfill them? And since we're going to be over some of them, it's better not to have been born because we just can't fulfill the laws of God. But today, then we have 7. Very easy for them.
That's how I understood it also. Great minds think alike. I think that's what he's saying. That's an amazing idea, right? Now, I don't know if he's saying this just to entertain the head of the Republic or not, but it's a really interesting idea that when we say it's hard to be a Jew, right? It's hard to be a Jew, but it's easy to be a Goy. Right? So when a Goy is born, of course they should celebrate. It's great. Life's not so hard for them. But for us, life is a battle. You have to do 613 mitzvot. It'd be better not to be born.
I think you mentioned this in the beginning. We do have Rosh Hashanah, which is the birthday of mankind. And we actually make that a major holiday.
That's absolutely true. And we'll return to that in a few minutes. Okay. Now, we're going to skip the Maharsha. And I want to now segue. Everything we've done so far has been pretty negative attitude towards birthdays, celebrating birthdays. So I don't want to leave you bereft of any kind of justification of having a birthday party. How old will you be, Bruce?
When I get older, losing my hair, many years. That's a hint. That's a musical hint.
How much?
That's a musical hint for the upcoming birthday.
Yeah. 64?
You got it.
Yeah. Okay. You got to know the Beatles there for that.
Well, I knew you were a
knows
musician in your youth, so
I was. Okay. So now, for all of you Iraqi Jews out there, this is your chance to shine. The Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, the Ben Ish Chai, lived around the turn of the century, right 100 years ago. Very great Torah scholar and Kabbalist. He says the following: Yesh noagim lasot b'chol shanat yom haleida leyom tov. There are those who have a custom every year to observe the day of the birth as a yom tov, a yantif. I don't think he said yantif. It was a yom tov. V'siman yafehu. It's a great thing. V'chein noagim b'veitenu. And in my house, in our house, we do it. He had big birthday parties in his house, the Ben Ish Chai. Oh my. So let's take a look at why birthday parties are good for the Jews. Little changing pace now. So let's learn a
in an
Gemara.
Islamic society, they don't have that avodah zarah connection.
So maybe that's part of the sort of social reasons. That's not the reason he gives. He gives more of an internal Torah reason, as you'll see right now. So there's this famous story in the Gemara. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who became the supreme halachic authority for the Jewish people at a very young age. Many of you probably know the story. But before he accepted the position, he asked his wife, should I take the job or not? Amorale leit lach chivarta. You know, you don't have any gray hairs. You're so young. I'm not sure you should accept this position. No one will respect you. You're too young. And guess what happened? Ahu Yoma Bar Tamne Srei Shne Havet. That day, 18 rows of gray hair emerged in his beard. Nisa is a miracle. The Hadru Le Tamne Srei Dari Chivarta. I'm sorry, I messed up. It was that day was his 18th birthday, and then there was a miracle on that day. And he developed 18 rows of gray hair. Hainu Dekama Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And now we understand what Rabbi, you'll know this from the Haggadah. That's what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah meant when he said, Harei ki ben shivim shana. I'm 70. Right? If you remember from the Haggadah, he said he never knew a justification for saying Shema at night. Why is the mitzvah of saying Shema at night? And then he finally learned it. But he says, I'm 70 years old, and I don't know the reason to justify saying Shema at night. Why is he's kid? He's like 70. Not because he didn't know his birthday, so he's approximating. It's because he meant he looks like he's 70, but he's not really. So what happened? A miracle happened. He got gray hair. By the way, you know that I'm 18 years old? But being thrust into the position of, I don't know what, the chief rabbi of Ma'ale Michael Street, Arba Allah in Alon Shvut. So I had to grow some gray hairs in order to be more respected. Now, why is this important?
Is there any monkey wrench by throwing into there's midrashim that mention many people's birthdays? David, Moshe, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. We all know, it mentions, it doesn't give you well, sometimes it does, born on Pesach. They actually mention, like the day, because we know when they die.
Okay, so now we're moving into the positive. So I want to show you what the Ben Ish Chai does with this. Ben Ish Chai wrote, Ben Ish Chai, by the way, is the name of a book and that he wrote. And then Ben Yehoyada is another book he wrote. That's his book on the Agadah of the Talmud. And he points out the following. If you look at that passage in the Talmud where it says that he grew the 18 rows of hair, of gray hair. So he says, look at the Talmud carefully. It says that Hahu Yoma, that day, Bar Tamne Srei Shnei Havan. It was the day in which he became 18. He says, nearly Bisyata Dishmaya. He says, it seems to me, with God's help, why does the Talmud say on that day the miracle happened when he was 18? Normally the Talmud would say at that time. At that time that he was trying to figure out if he'd take the job or not. But it actually says in that day. He speculates, says, why that day he was 18. It doesn't mean in general it was during the year when he was 18. It means that day was his birthday. At that time, he was 18 years old. That day, that's why the miracle happened. The miracle happened because it was his birthday. Because we know that on the day of the birth of a person, there is a specially strong mazal. And you'll get success on the day of your birthday because of your mazal. And we'll discuss this in a second more. That's why you should make a yantif, right? He said it in his house. They made a yantif out of it. You should make a yantif on your birthday. Why? Because it's a special, powerful day in which your mazal is operating on steroids. Right? He got 18 layers of gray hair parallel to his 18th birthday, like 18 candles on the cake. It was evidence he was a great tzaddik. All his 18 years of life were good years in his righteousness. Okay. Well, what is he talking about? That the day of your birth is some kind of special mazel dika shaw. It's a especially fortunate day. It's based upon a fascinating Gemara in Talmud Yerushalmi. Now, by the way, for those of you who follow Sefaria, it's this great free database, they now have the entire Talmud Yerushalmi in English. Amazing thing. So let's learn Talmud Yerushalmi now. Amalek Koshvan Haya. Amalek was a sorcerer. Did you know that? He's a sorcerer. Mahaya said, what did he do? Hayam ma'amid b'nei adam b'yom genusya shelo. On the day of genusya, we learned that word in Rosh. If you remember the beginning of today's session, genusya means his birthday. When he fought against the Jews, or anybody else for that matter, he would only put soldiers at the front that it was their birthday. Happy birthday! You're at the front. That was the birthday present. Okay, why? Lomar lo b'mehira adam nofel b'yom genusya shelo. Because he knew that it's not easy to fall on your birthday, because it's a mazel dika time. It's your lucky time. So he would employ soldiers that it was their birthday. Ma'asa Moshe. So how did the Jews win the battle with Amalek? Irbei v'tamazalot. Moshe was able to do a miracle, and he switched around the stars so that the mazal, which comes through the constellation, would be messed up. So they all thought they were protected because it was their birthday, and they were having this special energy coming through their mazal, the constellation. Moshe moved around the stars, and they became vulnerable, and that's how they were able to win the battle.
Because I have to leave in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask, question is, why do people say it would be better if he wouldn't have born than he was born? If you're born, you can do all kinds of good things. Whereas if you're not born, you're not doing anything.
So that's a beautiful comment, and I'm glad you feel that way. And I see you haven't become cynical as you become more mature. I believe you're past bar mitzvah, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, okay. So your point is well taken. That's why the Lubavitch Rebbe actually said, the Balatanya, I should say, that doesn't mean that it would be better not to be born. It just means a little rougher that you're born because you have to observe the mitzvahs. And so that's a challenge. So, but having a challenge is a good thing. And you're right. We have to make for God a dwelling place in this world. You can't do that if you're not born. So I love your point. Now, I want to now understand what's going on here now. So what's being suggested is that there is, on your birthday, a special vibe. Can't think of a better word. A special vibe, I don't know, or special energy. Remember we started off, we saw the Eved Davar who said that on the day that something is created, that there's a special quality of that day. Okay, now we're going for a full circle. Why that was important. That's this mystical idea, or you can call it whatever you want to, that the day in which something is created, it's not, the anniversary is not remembering. This is a big, big idea. I've seen this used in a lot of different sources, understanding the Jewish calendar. All of our holidays, which discuss historical events, they are not to remember what happened. The Jewish calendar day actually is pregnant with the same mystical energy. So Pesach is a time in which we don't remember freedom. We have a special energy, a mystical energy in that day to experience the freedom. So the day in which you're born, there is this mystical energy of vitality. I want to just show you how this plays itself out. I don't know how many of you know it. In Chabad, they make a huge deal out of birthdays. They do. Why? So just because we're short for time, I'll just read the little English here. This is from the most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe. He advocates celebrating your birthday big time. And the explanation for this is on the birthday, the matter of birth is repeated. A renewal which enhances the energy of the life force. You're coming into being. There's a burst of vitality, and Bruce emerges from the womb, already circumcised, with a beard, like Moshe Rabbeinu. Amazing. It's an expression of this vital energy. Therefore, just as in his birth he receives life force by the mazal in which he was born, so too on his birthday every year, the drawing down of his life force from his mazal is repeated. You have an energy on that day which can then be utilized for tremendous spiritual growth and achievement. And according to this, the matter of rejoicing, giving praise and thanksgiving on birthday is not only in relation to the first birth event remembered on this day, it's not you remembering it, but also in relation to the matter of birth as done on this very day. You're rebirthing. You're experiencing rebirth on that day because of the mystical energy of that day. And that is the mystical basis of the Chabad's very much promoting the notion of birthdays. So
with that logic, yahrzeits would not be such a popular day.
That's true too. The Chatam Sofer, by the way, just at the end here says the birthday is the Rosh Hashanah of the individual person. Just like Rosh Hashanah of the year, and I mentioned this before, is they kind of the same energy that brought the world into being. We have a personal Rosh Hashanah. Our personal Rosh Hashanah is our birthday. And therefore, we can use that energy to experience a renewal, a renaissance, a rebirth. And what a contrast between the first sources and the last sources here. And you can choose whichever view you like.
So does this fall into the world of like Dat Torah? Because there's no halacha about it. So you could ask
Rav Arusi does think.
Oh.
He says forbidden. So and there's a certain logic to it. But I think you're pretty safe grounds to celebrate it. But make sure you infuse that celebration with thanksgiving to Hashem, praises to Hashem, and much fine single malt whiskey. And on that note,
you spent time in yeshiva. Did the Rosh yeshivas there or teachers? Is there any acknowledgement of their birthdays?
I don't recall ever hearing anything about birthdays.
And yet yahrzeits we will hear about.
That's true. It's actually discussion of that because there's certain it's considered to be good if you are born and die on the same day, and so that'll be another topic.
Thank you,
everybody. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Thank you, Rabbi Zav. Thank you. Okay, guys. Thank you. See everyone tomorrow.